The Great Pyramid is one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Who built it? When is it still around? And what's happened to it in the years since it was built? There's great history behind it. In fact, it seems to be mentioned in the Bible. Well, a few months ago, we came across the Pillar of Enoch, which is a study of the Great Pyramid, the lost legend of the Great Pyramid. And we want to talk with Ken Klein, the man who produced this tremendous video, again on today's Prophecy in the News. Gary Stearman is here, Ken Klein is here. Gary, we've got a lot to talk about.
And it's a pleasure to have Ken Klein with us today. Ken, welcome to Prophecy in the News. Let's talk about the Great Pyramid, which most people believe is a tomb. There's this man commonly known as Cheops. Now, that's the term that's you see in common publications, and everybody believes it's his tomb. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, it's the basis for that belief goes way back in time, and today it's kind of built upon 3 what I call dubious facts of history. One is this Herodotus, who is known as the father of history, who in the 4th century BC decided to make a trip to the Giza Plateau where the Great Pyramid was built, and he was like very fascinated, like so many people are with the Great Pyramid. I mean, millions every year go there just to see this incredible, it's the first wonder of the world, and it's the last remaining wonder of the world. And it remains for a lot of reasons that we'll get into later in the program. But he went there about the 4th century BC to try to find out or figure out, you know, who built the Great Pyramid, how it was done, just same kinds of questions we're asking today. And so he went there at least 2,000 years after it was built. I mean, that's about the same distance it is from us to Jesus' time. And that's a lot of time. So how do you pick up on the trail of that? So basically what he did was he talked to the townspeople and learned that this was the tomb of Khufu. That was Cheops is the Greek name. And so then he tried to figure out how long it took to build the Great Pyramid. And he calculated that it took 30 years to build the Great Pyramid. And but when you look into his calculations and look at some of the external factors involved in his calculations, such as, you know, how big was the Nile, how deep was the Nile, how did they move the blocks to boats, and so forth. Under careful scrutiny, his calculations don't make sense. And yet, if you went to Egypt today and you talked to Dr. Zahi Hawass, the head of the Department of Antiquities, he would stridently hold fast to, yes, Herodotus made the accurate calculations, and that's one of the first tenets upon which the idea of the tomb theory rests. But there's others as well.
Let's talk about Khufu. Now, called Cheops, the Grecian form of his name. When we think of statues of pharaohs in Egypt, we think of the big Ramses statue. It's got to be like 120 feet tall. We think of all these incredible statues. Right. Where are the statues of Khufu?
Well, you know, that's one of the things they built it on too. Is this statue of Khufu. So I went looking for this statue of Khufu because I saw it in magazines, you know, and I thought, well, there's a statue of Khufu. So I tracked it down at the Egyptian Museum and went inside to look at it. And when I went into this site, I had a guide, by the way, take me in there. And when I saw it, I'm not kidding you, I started laughing. It was so ridiculous. It's this tall.
That tall?
It looks like it's carved out of soap.
Really?
It's 3 inches tall. And it says something, I think his name's written on it. And it was found like several hundred miles from the Giza Plateau.
Wow.
So you're going, well, how do you connect this teeny little statue with the Great Pyramid and make this quantum leap in logic that doesn't make any sense at all? So it's one of the tenets upon which they base the whole idea that the Great Pyramid is the tomb of Khufu, and it's just silly.
Yeah. Now let me mention that the Greeks call Herodotus the father of history.
Father of history.
But Flavius Josephus, in his writings 2,000 years ago, called Herodotus the father of lies. So that's how much he thought about Herodotus's writings. There were so many things wrong with the writings of Herodotus. that just didn't make any sense when compared to the writings of the Hebrews. And by the way, the writings of Flavius Josephus deal with the antiquities of the Jews. Starts out with creation, talks about Noah, Seth, the flood, Moses, and all of the history of the Jews. And Flavius Josephus says we're correct. Mm-hmm. And that Herodotus just extrapolated his own ideas into history.
Right. Now, if you look at there's 2.4 million inner core blocks to the Great Pyramid. They average anywhere from 3 to 5 tons each. 2.4 million blocks mm-hmm. that had to be carved out, moved across the river, which would have been, when you see how big the Nile is and how it overflooded in the rainy season, so your actual time that you could have worked on the Great Pyramid would have been cut to 9 months, and then they didn't have lights at night, night lights. They would have had to lay, to fit into Herodotus's time frame, they would have had to put a stone in place every minute and a half, 24/7 for 20 years, nonstop, to fit into his time frame. And that doesn't even include the time it took to cut out the casing stones, which were 15 tons each and carved on each side to such a precision that when you put them together, it was the distance between the spaces was 1/50th of an inch, which the Egyptians filled with mortar. So this was
filled with mortar?
They were
the builders of the Great Pyramid.
Put mortar in between the joints. Okay. You go, well, what? I mean, if it's 1/50th of an inch, isn't that tight enough? I mean, what's the point of the mortar? And obviously, it was to keep out seawater.
Yeah.
They sealed that thing up. And so, how long would it have taken? It couldn't have been done in a 20-year period. No way.
Mm-hmm. And how many casing stones?
The casing stones, we calculated 144,000, which is another interesting
fascinating number, isn't it?
But there's just no way that Herodotus's calculations were accurate. It would have taken a lot longer.
So basically, the Egyptians didn't build the Great Pyramid.
They did not build the Great Pyramid.
How did you put this together?
Well, at first, J.R., I tried to work through the Department of Antiquities in Cairo, Dr. Hawass. And I could make no progress because it's very difficult to work with the bureaucracy in Egypt. And I found out that you could not film inside the Great Pyramid. It was against the law to film inside there, and I knew I had to film inside there. And I got frustrated trying to work through it. And then they wanted to charge me a lot of money for a licensing fee, and then they limited where I could film. And I knew that that wasn't going to work for me. So I decided to sneak into Egypt. There were places I wanted to go that were restricted. You were not allowed to use a tripod. It was a $10,000 fine if you used a tripod. And so I had some real obstacles to overcome. But I knew the Lord wanted me to do this because the message of the Great Pyramid is something for the world. And yet it's suppressed by a traditional Egyptian dogma. So I went over there for a recon trip, took some pictures and studied their security to see how to defeat their security. And then I went back a second time with spy cameras and figured out how to get through it. And actually we had to take 2 guys in with a spy camera and break it down so that we could, they wouldn't know what we had. And then we had to dress in the dark, practice dressing in the dark in my hotel, so that when we went inside, we could put it all back together with our eyes closed, and we could do it. We worked it down to get it down to about 2 minutes, where we could actually reassemble all of our equipment. That's how well we were practiced. And then we went in there and filmed inside. And
now, what do you mean by spy camera?
Well, I bought an Indiana Jones hat, took it to a shoemaker, and had sweat holes put into it. And I put a camera, a little spy camera. It's about the size of a quarter, maybe half dollar. And I fixed it inside so that it could shoot out one of those sweat holes. And then I had an iPod that it was connected to that I purchased for, I think, $500 or $600. And I went in there and recorded the shooting of it inside. And it worked out pretty. We actually got busted 3 times. One time in front of the Great Pyramid by security. And somehow we just kind of, like when Jesus walked through the crowd, it wasn't his time to be thrown over the cliff. we just walked through. Another time, right across from the Sphinx, there's this 3-story building, which is a Colonel Sanders' Kentucky Fried Chicken building, and at the third floor, it's a spectacular view of the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx, and it's to the east of the Sphinx. And we were up there filming, and they won't let you film. You know, they don't. That's how they make their living. And the police busted us there, but we somehow got away. And there was another time we almost got caught inside, and we kind of slipped away. But the Lord really watched over us. If we had 3 close calls. We would have lost our equipment, $10,000 fine, and been in jail. But we were actually blessed, and it worked out perfectly. It was very dangerous, but I knew that we had to do it. I just knew it had to be done.
Let's talk about one more thing before we leave this subject. That is that English archaeologists back in the 19th century visited the pyramid, started measuring it and so forth, going inside. One of them claimed to have found an inscription. Now, this brings us to another subject. All over Egypt, everything has inscriptions written on every side of it. But the Great Pyramid is notably free of any form of inscription except for one red ochre inscription that was found by a man named Howard Weiss, and he claimed to have found the name Khufu. And you mentioned this in your video.
Well, anybody that's studied this carefully has come to the conclusion that he was a fraud, that he was looking for a way to fund his expeditions. He was running out of money. He was in a race with this other fellow at the time, and he thought to himself, what could be of more significance than the authorship of the Great Pyramid? And so we know that he dynamited his way into the upper, there's chambers above the king chamber. They're relieving chambers, and there's 5 of them. And so, first of all, no sensible archaeologist would use dynamite. Have you ever heard of an archaeologist using dynamite to discover anything? They used toothbrushes and toothpicks. He dynamited his way into these upper chambers, and he was the only one in there that we know. And strangely, in a strange place, not written well, is the name Kuti, not even Khufu. And of course, this is one of the evidences that Dr. Hawass and the Egyptologists and the traditionalists use as one of the tenets, one of the 3 tenets upon which they build their tomb theory. It's a fraud, and yet it perpetuates to this day. And they protect that dogma. That's why I had to go in there secretly with spy cameras and do all my work underneath the radar, so to speak, to get it done. But most of the world believes that the Great Pyramid is the tomb of Khufu Cheops, but the fact of the matter is the things upon which this theory rests is all false.
Now, let me ask you a question about this Khufu. There is a stele called the inventory stele. Tell us about how you found it and what it says about the builder of the Great Pyramid.
The inventory, I call it the stele. Stele is fine. It's S-T-E-L-E. You could pronounce it either way. The inventory stele was, more was known about it decades ago, and recently the knowledge of it has been covered over. And decades ago, when it was deciphered and understood, it was written on there that Khufu claimed that he was not the builder of the Great Pyramid, that he only was doing repair work on it, and that not only was he doing repair work on the Great Pyramid, he was doing repair work on the Sphinx, and that he actually only built 3 smaller pyramids, which would have been pyramids to the southwest of the Menkerios pyramid, which there's 3 great pyramids on the Giza plateau, but there's 3 small pyramids next to the Menkerios. He claimed to have built those for his family members, and they're all in disrepair compared to the other ones. Yes. So he never claimed that he was the builder of the Great Pyramid. In fact, he said he was not. So we have this stele, but now I went looking for this. I went, well, this is really important. To find this stele and to have the world be able to see it would be proof that this was not built by the Egyptians.
And where did you find it?
I went looking for it in the Cairo Museum, and they told me they said no, it's over by the Sphinx. So I went over there looking for it, and I found it, but it's all covered over with wood and metal. You cannot read it, even if you wanted. Nobody's going to open it up. So they're suppressing the truth of it to maintain the integrity of their dogma, which rests on these false tenets. But, you know, I think another really fascinating thing is that wherever you go in Egypt, you can go to Luxor, you can go anywhere, and on their temples, in their tombs, everywhere you look, in the step pyramid down there to the south to the south of the Great Pyramid, I went underneath. There's hieroglyphics. There's wall paintings depicting, you know, Egyptian life, where you see Egyptians hunting with spears and carrying geese over their shoulders of their kills. Everywhere you look in Egypt, you see wall paintings or hieroglyphics, but you cannot find anything in or on the Great Pyramid or on the Khafra Pyramid or on the Menkaure Pyramid. They have nothing, which is strange. Not only is it strange, it's like so conspicuous by its absence. You have to say, well, why would they miss this? And the only conclusion is because they were built before the Pharaonic period, when they honored the gods of Egypt. There's no honor to any of the gods. You would think that whoever built that would honor the god that he worshipped, but there's nothing. There's not any clue that this was built by the Egyptians. There's not any depiction of the Egyptian life either.
Well, the Egyptians were idolaters. They did not worship Jehovah God. In fact, were opposed to him. And what we have in Isaiah, in that day there shall be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord, mentioning the Great Pyramid as an altar to the Lord. How could the Egyptians have built an altar to the Lord? That's the big question.
That's a great thought. I had never considered that before, but that goes right to the very point that we're trying to make here.
Now, the Egyptians are Hamitic. They come from Ham. Shem, Ham, and Japheth were the sons of Noah. The interesting thing about the Hamites is that Cush, his son was Nimrod, who built the Tower of Babel,
yeah,
which appears to be another pyramid. And then after the dispersion of the three various lines of the human race into three different races, as they traveled from the Mesopotamia Valley to all parts of the world, the Hamitic people went down into Egypt and established the Egyptian dynasty.
That seems like when it started, yes.
Yes, and so the pyramid was already there when they got there.
Yes, and not only did the Egyptians have this egocentricity about them, because you can see it in the giant statues of Ramesses and all these kings. In fact, when you go to Luxor, if you've never been to Egypt, it's fantastic. Luxor is up the Nile. You see these amazing temples built, and every pharaoh built bigger than his predecessor. And so because they want to make their statement, this is who I am, this is my statement. And when you see even Ramesses, his wife is really small compared to how huge he is. And you see these gigantic, that's what makes this little statue of Khufu such a joke. And so they were very egocentric, trying to outdo their predecessors. But when you get to the Giza Plateau, the first pyramid that was built was the Great Pyramid, the first wonder of the world, the only remaining, and every one of them shrunk. So the pharaonic egocentricity is not contained in the three pyramids on the Giza Plateau, because each subsequent pyramid is smaller. And when you couple that together with the fact that they're in alignment with the stars in the belt of Orion, this seems to be like a reflection of it's like a star map on Earth trying to tell us something. So this was built with such precision and with such an attention to the stars that it goes beyond the capacity of primitive people carrying geese over their shoulders and holding spears. Where did this technology come from? It certainly couldn't have come from the Egyptians. They didn't have it.
Now today, if you take the surface of the Earth and take all of the mountains and figure up the highest mountain and the lowest valley, and then you put it all down into a mean altitude, that is an average altitude of the planet, it would be exactly the height of the Great Pyramid.
That's correct.
So the Great Pyramid was built to the height of the average
mean altitude
of the Earth, of the entire Earth. Now that is a technology that just is beyond the capability of ancient Egyptians.
Well, not only that, but they had to be the greatest land surveyors ever, because they actually built the Great Pyramid exactly in the center of the Earth in relationship to the land mass. They didn't have ships to travel the ocean to draw maps. They didn't have satellite pictures. They did this without a compass. to be able to, not only that, they built it on probably the only place that would maintain the weight of that, which was a solid granite plateau. And it's right at the center of the crescent of the Nile. So to be placed in this spot where it was, for all that criteria to come into play, could only have been done at the Giza Plateau. And they found it. How did they find that if it wasn't from some kind of supernatural intelligence telling them where to build it? Most likely, this is the foundation stone of the earth that was spoken to Job. Where were you when I built the foundation stone of the earth? A prophecy that points to the Almighty. And it was built in the only place that it could have been built.
Now, when Moses built the tabernacle, God said, build it according to this pattern, and God gave him the pattern to build the tabernacle. When Noah built the boat, I'm confident that God gave him the plans to build the ship to save the world. Well, whoever built the Great Pyramid, and most likely the sons of Seth, and Noah was the 7th generation from Adam, so he was the 5th generation down the line from Seth. He was an offspring of Seth.
No, Enoch was 7th.
I'm sorry, Enoch. Enoch, the
7th generation from Adam.
The considered builder of the Great Pyramid, 7th generation. When he built this thing, he also got plans from God. That's my point.
Yeah, well, it says that Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. But what's interesting about that word God that we get in our modern translations is the word Elohim. And Elohim is the plural of Eloah. Eloah is only mentioned one time in all the Bible. It's most likely where the Arabs got the name Allah from, was from Eloah. We think that's the case. But Elohim is the plural of the Almighty. So Enoch walked with Elohim. Enoch walked with angels. And it was angels that came in, according to 1 Chronicles 28:18, in ships, which is fascinating, and counseled him and taught him how to build this thing, the dimensionality of the science that would have to go into it. The pyramid is built in such a way that the base is actually curved on each side at the same proportion as the circumference of the earth. So Enoch knew, and the people that built the pyramid knew, that the earth was round at least 3,000 years before Christ, a knowledge that wouldn't come to us until, 12, 13, 14? Well, they were still arguing that the earth was flat during Columbus's time. So these people had supernatural knowledge.
Well, you got to get it. This is a fascinating DVD. It's a documentary, a little over an hour long, and it talks about the various technologies that go into the Great Pyramid, and it talks about when it showed up, how long it's been around, and the casing stones that were on it. And there's so much more we'd like to talk about this. We just run out of time. I hope you'll get it today. Gary, last word?
Well, I just want to thank Ken Klein and say that this is exciting for me. We're going to continue our studies. I know that you're studying even now to do another video.
Yes, that's true.
Thanks for being here.
Well, Gary and JR, thanks for having me on the program.
It's all in this Pillar of Enoch, Lost Legend of the Great Pyramid video. It's an excellent presentation, very professionally done. Ken Klein here produced this Great Pyramid video. I want you to get it. This is J.R. Church and Gary Stearman. Until next time, keep looking out.
Since the airing of this program, we have now completed our three-part pyramid series. The first film is The Great Pyramid, Lost Legend of Enoch. The second, Message from the Stars. And the third, Gateway to the Galaxy. Each one of these films is a unique and compelling insight into the deep mysteries of the universe, the knowledge of which was lost long ago, but nevertheless encrypted into the Great Pyramid and has now been deciphered. These films will not be available in any bookstore, nor will they be seen on cable or network television. Release to the general public will not be until later in the year. When it does come out, the 3-part series will retail for $75. But because you folks have become acquainted with my films and have supported the work we do, I want to make the powerful 3-film series available to you for just $49. It's my gift and my way of saying thanks for your support. Once again, I want to thank you for helping me produce these important films.